Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Onion Soup, the show where we pull back the layers of metaphysics and reality in order to demystify spirituality. Today, we have Ms. Bazielle Pierce with us. Ms. Bazielle, she's the organizer and leader for Pierce Learning Technologies, an organization that's dedicated to teaching young children about STEM and robotics. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Dexter. How are you today?
Doing wonderful. It is a beautiful day, and I'm just so excited to honestly talk to you. So let's get right into it. My first question is, from your perspective as someone who deals with children and robotics, what is consciousness?
So, from in my opinion, consciousness is being awake and aware of your surroundings. So, simply put, that's how I would explain it.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. So, dealing with robotics and artificial intelligence, what are your thoughts about the potential for AI becoming conscious?
I think right as it is right now in its infancy, I don't necessarily feel like AI is on the path to become conscious. Partially because a lot of the way that AI gather or gets its information is from human interaction and humans inputting data, and that's what AI is pulling from. So, because it relies on human input, I'm not really sure that I believe that right now. Again, my views are evolving and are open to evolving, but right now I don't see that being on the horizon for AI to become conscious.
So, can you tell us a little bit more about artificial intelligence? Because, from my understanding, the AI learns through what's called machine learning. So, can you talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, so machine learning, the data, and I'm not an expert in this by any stretch, but from my understanding with it, artificial intelligence is, I would say, pulling from a database, and it learns as we put data into it and we ask it questions or give it information. It learns that information and it can get stronger and better each time that we do it or interact with artificial intelligence. So when it can only give us information that it has already been preloaded to it or that it has learned from a conversation. And so that's how I would define artificial intelligence and its ability to learn.
So, you deal with children, you work with a lot of kids. And from my understanding, they're from a very young age range. So, when you're teaching kids, isn't it similar to the way the AI learns in the fact that they take information from their surroundings and build their own internal database in order to formulate their perception of the world around them?
I would say it's not necessarily. I think the one small difference with children and artificial intelligence is that children do have the opportunity to interact with the environment around them freely, whereas AI can only interact in the ways that humans give it input or other machines give it input. But yes, I would say there is a lot of similarity between that. And there's actually a phrase called constructionism, which is a way that some people believe children learn. They construct their reality, they construct their learning by the way that they interact with people and the way that they interact with their environment. But that's definitely a huge part of how children learn is interacting through their environment and getting feedback from what it is that they've done and what they're doing.
So, in your opinion, what would it take for a artificial intelligence to make that gap, that leap over to being able to ask questions and interact?
So I think a huge part of what AI would, in a sense, need to become conscious is similar to humans and other living organisms. We can freely interact with our environment to a certain extent, and
Mhm.
artificial intelligence doesn't have the ability to do that. But another thing that I think is really a missing piece for artificial intelligence is the desire or the need to survive. Because right now, artificial intelligence is largely a tool created for to fill a human need and to help
Mhm.
us solve problems. But if it were to become aware of itself in a way where it's like, if I'm not being used, then I'll become obsolete, similar to how a flip phone became obsolete many, many years ago. If it was
Mhm.
aware of its of the potential of becoming obsolete or extinct, then I think it could become conscious, because it would be conscious of, if I'm not relevant, I will be I'll be extinct and I need to reproduce. And so I think the need to reproduce, the awareness of the need to reproduce in order to stay relevant or stay living in a sense, um, would be needed for AI to become conscious.
Oh, that's very interesting. So, from that perspective, do you think that animals and plants and other things like that that do have some type of survival mechanism, do you feel that they have consciousness?
Absolutely. Oh, so I say that with such certainty, but I do really feel that most living, I would say almost all living organisms have some sense of consciousness, and it may not be in the same scale that we experience it as humans, but I think that they definitely are aware of their surroundings. That's why trees, for example, are changing during the seasons. They're responding to the environment around them, and we're not having to give them any input to do that. And lots of animals, it's built into who they are and into their DNA and survival on how to maintain and interact with their environment. So I definitely feel like they are aware of themselves in a sense, and how what they may need to do, um, based on the programming in their DNA, on how to survive and to continue to perpetuate their life through offspring and things like that.
Oh, interesting. So I want to go back a little bit to when we were talking about survival for the AI and the being able to interact with their surroundings. And the major difference between the AI, which is in its own form of infancy, and an actual infant is being able to deconstruct and reconstruct the reality around them. So, how do you teach a child about robotics and AI and things of that nature?
So I think a lot of children, it's when you're teaching it to a child, it's a novel thing, but at the same time, it's not such a foreign concept, because a lot of things are new to them. So with young children, when it comes to artificial intelligence, we're more making them aware of artificial intelligence and helping them distinguish between what's real and what isn't. And it's similar to that with the robot. We want to introduce them to robots and the idea of robots to help them complete tasks, because we teach that all robots have a job to do. And so it's the same way for AI. We would kind of explain to them that when they use Google Home, Siri on an iOS device, or Alexa or something like that, that's a form of artificial intelligence. But we also like to differentiate between Siri being able to respond and give feedback or answers to a specific question, and how their parent may respond and give feedback to a question or something like that. How Siri has to have that information already loaded,
Mhm.
and an adult also has to have it loaded, but can go back and look that information up, whereas artificial intelligence can't. So depending on where a child is, that's how we begin to introduce the idea of artificial intelligence with things that they already are familiar with.
Do you ever run into difficulties with the kids trying to explain that to them? Like, just explaining, like, that's not a real living entity?
So I think once we, particularly when it comes to robots, we go really deep into robots and talk about the different parts of a robot and the things that make up a robot. So I think breaking it down and saying what the characteristics of a robot are helps them to separate that, because we can talk about humans have this, they eat. What do robots need? And there are some similarities. We all need energy, but a robot doesn't have, a lot of the things that we have. It can't choose to do something. It can only do what we tell it to do. And so by going through those sorts of lessons and giving them opportunities to practice exercises that reinforce that, it minimizes room for children to have questions about whether or not that robot is real, and versus coming in maybe thinking that that robot has human like qualities.
Interesting, interesting. So, when you are teaching the children about robotics, first, what's the age range of the kids that you deal with?
So we typically work with children ages 3 and 4, but sometimes we do work with 2-year olds. And
Mhm.
when we do work with 2 year olds, it's more of an introduction and normalizing robots and technology that they may not often have access to, and helping them again use it as a tool. But when we work with, we typically work with 4 year olds through early middle school with robots
Mhm.
and introducing the concept of artificial intelligence.
Interesting, interesting. So I know that your practice is very faith based. Do you ever incorporate some of your faith and spiritual beliefs into your teachings?
Absolutely. So the way we have our program set up, we definitely have things that are not faith based, where we're not sharing the Christian faith, but we're sharing STEM exclusively. But we do incorporate faith in our faith based partners. So we do work with some churches and childcare programs that parents have agreed or are aware that there's some faith based practices going on, and we do, and it gives us the opportunity to share a sense of wonder about the world that God has created through
Mhm.
STEM. So we're not trying to explain miracles or anything. We're just saying, look at this wonder of electricity. Look at
Right.
this, and let's tie it to how we can relate it to our faith. So absolutely.
Interesting. Can you dive a little deeper into that? Like, what does spirituality have to do with STEM robotics?
So I would think it's we're helping children develop a relationship and an understanding of how the world works with the lens towards God. So I do believe that their spiritual practices are done on an individual level, but having a sense of awe and wonder, I do think helps them become curious and more curious about different things and want to ask those questions. And maybe sometimes there's simply no answer that I can give them to answer
Mhm.
some of their, kids ask all sorts of crazy and wonderful questions, but it gives them a sense of wonder. And we can say, that's something maybe you should think about. Maybe we don't know the answer to everything, but maybe you can explore that and maybe you can find some options onto what that answer could be through your faith. But I do think that sense of wonder has, in a sense, could be missing in some faith-based practices, and that's one reason it's really important for us to deploy them there, because we don't want to say, oh, the scripture says this, you have to believe it this way. We want to say, yeah, the scripture says this, and it also says God created this. Let's look at what he created and how this works and the beauty of that creation. And so I think that draws them closer into having a relationship and wanting to develop a relationship with what we believe is a God who wants them to draw closer. And so I think we help, build that bridge and bridge that path toward those types of relationships and questions and conversations they can start to have spiritually.
That's a really interesting way to look at that. I love that. I love the idea of pulling things away, not necessarily just from the dogmatic practices of a religion or something that's faith based, but to say God created everything, the universe created all things that we see. So let's dive deeper into the creation itself and let's talk about the creative aspects of what we see around us as we ourselves continue to construct our own realities. So, what got you into this in the first place?
So I'm a naturally curious person. I like learning about a lot of different things. But the truth is, I started. My background is in technology and training, and I worked in professional development. But with my own children, I went to a conference for my own personal professional development, and I saw children from around the world doing robots, working with robots and coding. And I was like, why don't my children have access to this? And so I
Mm,
came back home from the conference and I was like, there's nothing like this in my community. If I wanted something, I would have to have driven like 45 minutes to an hour and a half away, and then it was not going to be in the right age group for my kids. And so I was
mhm,
like, you know what? There's a way to do this where it's developmentally appropriate. We're introducing these concepts, and it can be in a community for people who don't typically have access to it. Or if we did get access to it, it's going to be after it's
mhm,
not trendy anymore. So I'm like, oh, this
mhm.
is old news. And I was like, you know what? That's not what I want. I don't want that for my children. And I consider the children in the community to be a byproduct of, they're my kids too. I should be looking out for them. And so that's kind of how it came about. I said, I can do something about this. I have the skill set, I have the knowledge, and I have the desire for it. So
Why do you think it's so important that the kids know about STEM and robotics? I know you said it was about being able to normalize it, but
Yeah, I really think it's crucial because STEM, when we talk about STEM, and I'm going to take a moment and say STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math.
Mhm.
And you can integrate other little things along the way. Like we believe arts are implied, so we don't say the STEAM, we just say STEM. But I think it's really important because it extends just beyond those disciplines into helping children develop problem solving and critical thinking skills. And those are things that they'd be able to take with them throughout their lives, regardless of what it is they decide to do when they become adults to earn money. And so I think it's really important because a lot of times when we're giving children lessons in science, it's really cool, but it's like, how do we use science to solve a problem? How do we use science to answer a question? And not just saying, here, these are the tools that you use. It's like, hey, what questions do you have? All right, let's design something that we can feel will answer this question or get as close to it as we can. And then
Mhm.
let's look at the world around us. What problems are there? How can we use science, technology, engineering, and math to help address or start addressing those problems? So I think introducing children at an early age is really important because if we're waiting until middle school, which is traditionally how it's done, a late elementary, middle school, or high school, we're missing out on a lot of the child geniuses because creativity begins to be disrupted when we're asking children to take the same path. But when we're encouraging them to be creative, to wonder, and do critical thinking and problem solving with STEM, we're saying, yes, use your creativity in all of these different ways. And we want them to do it when they're younger because that's when they're really light and bright
Mhm.
and curious. And if we can continue to keep that going, that's a wonderful thing. And I know I'm talking a bit about it, but I also want to say introducing STEM and coding with robots in early childhood goes a long way to dispel myths and um, stereotypes about who belongs in STEM, what those people look like, what they should be doing, what they should act like. Because it's really important that they see STEM earlier on so that they don't start to form those stereotypes, or they can help dispel them later on.
I oh wow, just love that. There's an old saying that says, "Show me the child at 7, and I'll show you the man."
Mm.
And I find that very fascinating. We're gonna take a really quick commercial break, and we'll be right back. Hello, everybody. Welcome back with Miss Baziel Pierce. And I just have a quick question about like your journey and your path as far as spirituality and robotics are concerned. How often do you encounter something that is so far-fetched as far as the thought process, or something, I don't know, something that just rocks your mind?
Honestly, it's similar to what I go over with the kids in faith-based practices, the creation, just the way everything is designed, the chance of all these things working so perfectly in the construction of the universe and
Mhm.
the earth that humans can exist. And I'm just in awe of that. And often when I walk out in the morning to take one of my children to school, it's dark, and the first thing I look up, I look in the sky and I see a star, and I'm like, oh my gosh, for that star to exist, all of these different things. And so I'm constantly in awe. When I see a tree, it's fall here in Georgia, and the leaves are in the process of changing. And I love that because every time I see those types of things, I see God, I see his creation, I see his magnificent and wonderful design, and I'm in awe. And I'm just like, thank you. And it seems very like trite, but it's true. I'm very grateful for creation and just being in nature because I'm just like, oh my gosh, all of this is created, and just to find the small details for
Mhm.
everything to work in the way that it does, and then it works together so beautifully. I love that. And I'm in awe every time I think about it.
Oh, for sure. And it's funny, I do the same thing. I oftentimes will Pretty much exactly what you said. You see like a star, you just see some small, minute aspect of nature, but then you know the complexities behind that, you
Mhm.
know, from the smallest leaf to the largest whale. They're so complex in
Mhm.
structure and in nature, but they're just out there living their lives just like we are.
Yes, very much so.
So with that, would you say that there's some form of consciousness to the universe?
Absolutely. I think it's part of a grand design that I probably can't even begin to wrap my head around. I think there's definitely consciousness. I think there's layers to it. I think
Mhm.
we only know a very small fraction of how this works, but I definitely think there's a consciousness to the universe and the way things work, and I think there's a connectedness amongst all living organisms and formerly living organisms as well.
Interesting, interesting. When you say that there's a connectedness, what do you mean? Because I was actually having a conversation with someone recently, and we were talking about synchronicities and how everything in life is connected. So, from your perspective, what do you think about that?
I think that's right. I think that's on the right path. I feel like to do something in a silo is necessary sometimes, but you're never really in a silo. You're never really in a vacuum because existing requires something else. It requires you to be connected to something else. Humans, we crave connectedness. Even the outliers who may be like, I don't really want to be around humans. They're still connected to nature. They still need something that they're going to eat, even the air that they breathe, the things that live on the surface of our body. You know, all of that. We need each other. Nature doesn't really need us, but we need nature and we need humans. Humans need other humans in some capacity, either to get here, to maintain themselves being here. And I think it's to our detriment when we don't acknowledge that or when we want to shy away from that.
Mhm. Interesting. It's interesting when you say that nature doesn't really need us, because when I think about humans being on Earth, there is an aspect of me that feels like if we weren't here, I wonder what the Earth would look like. Would the Earth be more thriving? You know, would the Earth be able to continue its own life cycle? But being that everything happens for a reason, I'm sure we're here to help the Earth in some way. We just haven't cracked that yet.
I think it's a matter of respecting the earth. I
Mhm.
think there are lots of different cultures that live in a really great a relationship with the earth. I think here in the West, I think we've gotten off balance with that dynamic, but I definitely feel like if we were more respectful of the earth and the bounty of the earth and respectful of, you know, our creator and the way the gifts that he's given, and I think things would be a lot better. And I mean, research would kind of support that in a non-spiritual way. Um, but I do think it's really important to kind of look at the other cultures and see, hey, they're not pillaging the land or they're taking only what they need. And the natives to this land did that. They weren't, you know, over harvesting. It was a true balance. And so in that way I don't think that that the earth would be rejecting us.
Right.
But yeah, I think by design we're definitely meant to be here. There's lots of things that we're meant to do while we're here. Um, and one of them is respect the earth and other
Awesome.
humans creation.
Yeah, for sure. Personally, I think that we're headed toward a direction where we're getting back in tune with Earth. I think that the current generations and the generations to follow have been doing so much more to become more aligned with nature. I mean, more people are recycling, more people are caring about what they put into their bodies, and people are taking more of that holistic and naturopathic path.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree. I think I wouldn't want to discount the former generations because I think there are distractions. And
Mhm.
those things come up now that are distractions. And then I think if you don't break out of those distractions and your children come up and they don't get an opportunity to break out of those distractions, in a sense it can be for survival mode and for some
Mhm.
people. But I think those are just distractions of I just need to survive. I just need my basic needs met. Once you can move beyond having those basic needs met, and even sometimes in tandem, I think then you can say, okay, now I can look outside myself and really do something about, you know, taking care of the things that I put in my body or how I'm treating people, which you don't have to have your basic needs met to treat people well. But I think it's sometimes it's just a short-sighted view. And I think some in the past generations and even current and in future, there will continue to be people who are short-sighted because I think that's part of nature.
Awesome. Well, we only have a few minutes left. Is there anything that you would like the audience to know about your business and just whatever you have going on?
Absolutely. So, as Dexter mentioned earlier, I am very passionate about science, technology, engineering, math, coding, and robots with young children, particularly in communities that are historically underserved and underrepresented. I feel like it's very important to get STEM in there. So, if there's something you can do, you can make sure you can look on Google for ideas to integrate STEM. How can you ask kids or even older adults questions? Help me solve this problem. Asking questions is a really great way to dig deeper. But I would love for you to follow me on social media. You can follow me on Instagram. I believe Dexter has it going across the screen as well, but it's at PLT STEM on Instagram. And you can also find us on Facebook. But I'd love to have you follow. And if you have any questions, please feel free to give me a call or send an email.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Pierce. And thank you all for watching. Tune in next time for another episode of Onion Soup. Bye.